Haunted Tunnel. I lived in Virginia for several years as a child and teenager. Growing up in a semi-rural area, I heard many haunt stories from family and friends, some of them revolving around Senable, I'm not positive on the spelling, tunnel. The paranormal has always interested me because I started having ghostly experiences at a young age, and of course, as soon as I got the chance to check this out for myself, I did. Sensible Tunnel is nestled in between two mountains in Hawkins County, Virginia. It stands almost at the end of a long and narrow winding road. Houses are few and far between on this road, but there is a house at either end of the tunnel, one of which was coined the Sensible Mansion. Across the road from this mansion is a small cemetery that I believe to be a family burial place. There is a creek that runs on the side of the tunnel and now is unused train tracks that lay on top of the tunnel. My most hair-raising experience at Sensible Tunnel happened when I was 14 years of age. It was winter and all of the schools in the area had been dismissed early because of the snow. My boyfriend, Jake, and his friend, Opie, picked my best friend, Tanya, and I up from school. We went to my house for a while, but being teenagers, we were soon bored. So, as soon as the sun went down, we decided to venture out to the tunnel. Opie had never been, and Jake had only been there once before. We all piled up into Opie's truck, which was a small Ranger type truck with bucket seats. Opie drove, Tanya sat in between the bucket seats, and I sat on Jake's lap on the passenger side. When we got to the tunnel, there was about a half a foot of water standing in the middle of it due to snow that had melted off from an earlier snowstorm. We pulled into the middle of the tunnel and Opie turned the truck and lights off. We sat there for a few minutes joking about the ghosts. Perhaps this was a mistake because it wasn't long before strange things started happening. The other three in the truck were talking when I noticed that something was dripping from the inside rear view mirror of the truck. I wiped it with my finger and noticed it was the consistency of water. I pointed this out to everyone else, and Opie said, "That's never happened before." Tanya thought it might have been condensation, but Jake pointed out that the windows weren't fogged over. Then we heard the footsteps in the water. It sounded like someone was walking up behind the truck. We all heard it, and we all turned to look at the same time. We saw nothing. Jake rolled down his window and stuck his head out, looking down the bed of the truck to the back, and Opie did the same on his side. Neither of them saw anything. I remember them both rolling their windows back up, and Jake looking at me saying, "That was so weird." I will never forget the look in his eyes. He was definitely getting scared. And I replied, "Yeah, that was weird." Tanya requested that we leave, but the rest of us weren't ready. Then something hit the truck hard enough that it rocked the entire truck. It sounded like it came from Jake's side on the truck bed. Tanya and I screamed, and the boys came close to screaming. It was then that a white translucent figure appeared in front of us at a distance of about 10 feet. It appeared to me as if it were a woman in a long, flowing dress, and she was getting closer, ever so slightly. It was at this point that Opie said, "It's time to go," and he started the truck and we drove back to my house. About a week later, Opie decided he hadn't had enough of the tunnel. He talked our friend Clinton into going with him to the tunnel to spend the night. They stopped by KFC on the way and bought a bucket of chicken. They were ready to post up for the night. Their vigilance would go unrewarded that night. They eventually tired of waiting and seeing nothing, and decided to go home in the wee hours of the morning. Opie took Clinton back to his truck, and Clinton followed him the rest of the way into town. Opie totaled his truck that night. He wrecked with no good cause, while Clinton watched helpless behind him. Opie had no memory of why he wrecked, but I have a theory. I don't want to be quick to make a firm conclusion because I wasn't there that night, but I do wonder if Opie picked up something in the tunnel. Is that even possible? I don't know. Darklow Tunnels. My latest ghost hunt took part in a place known as Drakelow Tunnels. The tunnels are located in the Midlands area of the UK and were built initially as a shadow factory for Land Rover during World War II. After the war, the tunnels were taken over by the government, who made changes to convert the tunnels into a nuclear bunker. After the Cold War, the tunnels had stood untouched until it had been released back to the public. I had been trying to get to this location for a while and was looking forward to getting stuck in it. With no source of natural light and no electricity, torchlight was the order of the day. We found early on that this created an unforeseen problem. A local airsoft group had access to the tunnels, and it turns out the airsoft pellets they use glow in the dark. You can imagine the excitement when we turned our torches off and noticed the number of glowing orbs behind us, only to find out on investigation they were nothing but small rubber balls. The strangest part of the night occurred partway through the night. We had created a circle with one person in the middle and attempted building up energy within the group. Whilst doing this, the person in the middle mentioned seeing a shadow lurking outside the circle, but more specifically behind one person. He said he was going to reach out and touch the person who the shadow was behind. His hand fell on my shoulder. Great. He called out, asking the shadow to come closer and to enter the circle. As he did this, I started to find it difficult to see the outline of the people standing next to me. The people next to me in the circle started to mention that they had lost sight of me altogether, but could still see the outline of the person to the other side. The person in the middle asked how I felt. Apart from being shrouded in, I'm not sure how best to explain it. A solid darkness might be the best way. I felt fine, so we continued and asked the shadow to enter the circle once again. The darkness continued to seem solid around me, but the two people on either side of me were able to see me again. But to them, I had changed. A few murmurs rippled around the circle, and I was asked by the person in the center how tall I was. I responded with 5'9", to which I was told, "You're not anymore." The description I was given was that, to the eyes of the people in the circle, I now appeared to be 6 foot tall and a lot broader. This continued for a few seconds before the shadow backed off and the darkness around me seemed less solid, and I could see the outline of the people nearest to me again. This is the first time I've been the witness to any form of transfiguration. How ironic, I still didn't get to actually see it. The tunnels. My name is Carl, and I live in South Africa. I've not had many experience with the supernatural, but I've always been fascinated by it. Well, this is one experience I did have. A couple years ago, when I was still in high school, I was about 16 years old. I'm 25 now, and my friends and I would go hang out in this park near our school. In this park was a tunnel. It was some sort of municipal tunnel. I think it was probably used for heavy rains or something. It was large enough for us to crawl around in, and although we ventured in pretty deep, we still don't know how deep it went. It was one of our regular stomping grounds where we'd hang out and smoke and drink and pretty much do the things high school kids do. One particular day, 4 of us decided to go to the tunnels. It was I, my buddy John, a girl by the name of Ashley, and her friend Eleonora. Now, in the opening of the tunnel, it was still pretty light, so we mainly used to hang out around there. But of course, the deeper you went, the darker it got. So we decided we would go as deep as we could, for lack of anything better to do. And so we did it with Ashley and followed by John, then myself, and lastly, closest to the entrance, Eleonora. We ventured pretty deep. We had been going for about 15 minutes, and by now it was so dark that we couldn't see our hands in front of our faces. Suddenly, Ashley, who had been leading our expedition, started screaming. Frantically, she elbowed her way past all of us and started running back. Well, needless to say, we were all freaked out and didn't care to stick around to find out what she was running from. So we followed suit. With our adrenaline pumping, it couldn't have even taken us 5 minutes to get out of the tunnel. When we got finally out to the entrance, we found Ashley holding her knees and sobbing. When she looked up, her nose was bleeding. She told us that in a split second, she felt coldness and was punched in the nose by some unseen entity. Well, that was the last of our tunnel venturing days. Though I still plan on visiting them again, it's not too far from where I live now. Thanks for reading, and remember, try to stay out of the way of creepy unknown entities who will probably punch you right in the face.